Florida man executed for the 1982 abduction and murder of Janet White. On a humid Tuesday evening, inside the walls of Florida State Prison near Starke, after 43 years, this story came to a final end. Kayle Bates, 67 years old, the convicted murderer, kidnapper, sexual assaulter, was strapped to a gurney and sentenced to death by lethal injection. But this wasn't just another execution. It was Florida's 10th execution this year, a chilling new record in the modern era. And the story behind Bates's crime. The brutal killing of Janet White in 1982 still shakes the Florida Panhandle to its core. Tonight, we dive into the crime, the man, the decades-long legal battle, and the final moments inside the death chamber. Stay with us because this story has twists, chilling details, and questions about justice that remain unanswered. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. The crime that shocked Florida. It was June 14, 1982. Janet White was a 29-year-old insurance clerk in Bay County, Florida, wife of Randy White, the youngest of 5 siblings and a loving wife who dreamed of having children and running her own businesses. Had her whole life ahead of her. That morning, she walked into her office just like any other day. After the return of lunchtime, she never made it home. When it was time to return to work, Randy wanted to make sure Renee got back safely to the State Farm insurance office where she worked, so he followed her in his car and watched her walk in. But a man had broken into the back of the office and was waiting for her. As Renee walked in, the phone was ringing. She answered and was about to say hello when Kayle Barrington Bates popped out, according to court records. Renee let out a bone-chilling scream, and Bates cut the phone cord, court records say. The woman who had been calling the office immediately called police. According to court documents, Kayle Bates entered the insurance office armed with a knife. He forced Janet from her desk, out the back door, and into a wooded area behind the building. What happened next was pure horror. Prosecutors say Bates attempted to rape her. When she resisted, he stabbed her to death. Then, as if the violence wasn't enough, he tore a diamond ring from her finger, blood still fresh on his hands. Janet's body was discovered in the woods not far from where she was abducted. The crime was brutal, senseless. Bay County had never seen anything like it. Bates was found at the scene of the crime, and he had the victim's blood on his clothing. He had the victim's ring in his pocket. All the evidence pointed to him. He was arrested, charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, and attempted sexual battery. And in court, the jury didn't hesitate. Kayle Bates was convicted and sentenced to death, but that was only the beginning. Decades of legal battles. What should have been a swift resolution turned into a 43-year legal battle. Bates appealed his sentence again and again. Lawyers argued he suffered from organic brain damage and that it hadn't been properly considered during sentencing. He filed motions with the Florida Supreme Court. He even filed lawsuits claiming that Governor Ron DeSantis's method of signing death warrants was racially discriminatory. But in each case, judges pushed back. The Florida Supreme Court said Bates had decades to raise these claims. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected his final appeal. And just this week, a federal judge dismissed his lawsuit, calling its statistical analysis deeply flawed. In other words, Kayle Bates was out of time. The execution. On Tuesday, August 19, 2025, the Department of Corrections said Bates woke up at 5:15 a.m. Tuesday and had 3 visitors, his daughter, his sister, and his brother-in-law. He declined a final meal and did not meet with a spiritual advisor. Tuesday evening, Florida State Prison. At exactly 6 p.m., the curtain to the death chamber opened. Inside, Bates was already strapped to a gurney, his left arm extended, 4 lines running into his veins. He stared blankly, refusing to make eye contact. When Alex Lanfranconi, a DeSantis spokesman, asked if he had any last words, just before the drugs started flowing, Bates gave a chilling answer. No. At 6:01 p.m., the drugs began to flow. A lethal injection of 3 drugs, a sedative, a paralytic, and a heart-stopping drug, according to the State Department of Corrections. Within a minute, Bates's breathing quickened. His chest rose and fell, heavier and faster. By 6:03 p.m., he stopped. At 6:05, the warden leaned over, shook his shoulders, called his name. There was no response. At 6:17 p.m., Kayle Bates was declared dead. Watching from the witness room was Janet White's husband, Randy, who had waited more than 4 decades for this moment. For Randy, this execution wasn't just punishment. It was closure. Florida's record-breaking execution year. This wasn't just about one man. With Bates's execution, Florida reached its 10th execution this year, breaking its modern record. Since 1976, when the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty, Florida's previous annual high was 8. Now, under Governor Ron DeSantis, the Sunshine State is leading the nation in executions. Texas and South Carolina, they're tied for second with 4 each. And nationally, Bates was the 29th person executed in 2025, with at least 9 more scheduled before year's end. Closing thoughts. Veterans groups had been asking Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who signed Bates's death warrant in July, to reconsider and spare Bates because of his military service. He was in the Florida National Guard for 6 years and is now the 4th veteran executed in the state this year. We can never be a veteran-friendly state when our leader is signing off on their deaths at the hands of the state, according to a letter signed by 130 veterans and sent to DeSantis. We urge you now to lead from a place of bravery, to return to the honor code from your service, and to stop setting the executions of our fellow soldiers. DeSantis has said he's signing death warrants for the worst of the worst, and that he wants to bring closure to victim families. The execution of Kayle Bates brings an end to a dark chapter that began in 1982 with the abduction and murder of Janet White. For her family, it is justice, delayed but not denied. The execution represents long-awaited justice for White, who was 27 when he lost his wife and witnessed the execution at the age of 70. I made a promise to her right after it happened that I would be there for every trial, every hearing, every appeal, and that as long as I was living, I would seek justice for her. I feel a relief that I can mentally let Renee know that justice has finally been served for her, and that's mentally what I need. It's always been for her. For Florida, it is another entry in a year that has made history for its relentless use of the death penalty. But the question remains, does execution bring true closure, or does it simply mark the end of one story, while the pain of another continues? Janet White's life was stolen in an act of brutality. 43 years later, the state of Florida stole back the time her killer never deserved. This is the story of justice, Florida style.